CommitToWealth.com. Creating a legacy by committing to real estate wealth.
Commit to Wealth Nation, welcome to the Commit to Wealth podcast. I'm your host, Juan Vargas. On today's show, we have Logan Freeman. Logan is a real estate investor, developer, and commercial real estate agent who represents buyers throughout the Kansas City area. He's completed over 120 transactions in less than a year through sourcing, acquiring, and renovating properties for clients. One of the coolest facts about him is that he's an ex-NFL player, having been with the Oakland Raiders. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Juan, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I really do appreciate that. So I guess, let's start with your background. Who is Logan? Tell us a bit more on your NFL career there, and tell us, who are you?
Sure. So a lot of your listeners might not know, but the capital of Missouri is Jefferson City, and that's where I grew up. So it's a small city near the campus of Mizzou in Columbia, but it's about 2.5 hours east of Kansas City. It kind of sits right between KC and St. Louis. So we sit right there in the middle of the state. So that's where I grew up and was raised. I really identified as an athlete all through grade school, high school, and then on to the collegiate level and excelled in all of those sports. But really, I found that the only reason I did excel in those sports was because of my work ethic and me being able to just push past a lot of different fears. I started as a freshman. I broke an ankle. I came back the next year and started as left tackle. We won more games than we've ever had. I was a 2-time or 3-time captain, which had never been happened before at my school. So all throughout college, still really identified with being an athlete. And then I had a really nice career as a college football player and was able to be picked up as a undrafted free agent with the Oakland Raiders. And what I didn't know that I do know now is that humility and having that same work ethic, it requires a different level of activity and a different level of mentality every time you level up. So I came from a Division II school, going and playing against mostly all Division I guys who were playing at these NFL prospect of teams with the same type of formats and plays that they had. I was a center. I've lost 100 pounds since then, and if you ask my wife, I've put on a few more since then. But I did lose 100 pounds at one time. I was 335 pounds, and I played center in college, and I went to the NFL. And as center, if anybody knows, you have to understand the defense really, really well. Well, I got away in Division II football with just being bigger, faster, stronger, and meaner than a lot of other players and just playing to the whistle. Well, when I got there, that lasted for me for about a month or two. And at that time, the cuts really started to come. And I kind of had a feeling that I was going to be on the chopping block. But what I learned a lot about myself in that process is you need to be humble throughout the process, because once you get to a certain level, everybody's at the same physicality. And what gets you to the next level is your mentality and your psychology and your mental ability to do that at a higher level. So I had a great experience out in Oakland. It was when Tony Sperano was actually, he's passed away now, but Tony Sperano was my offensive line coach. And it was a really great experience for me. I met some really good players. Menelik Watson is still playing in the league, and if he's listening to this, hey Menelik, it's been a while, but good to watch you on the big screen, man. It was fun playing right next to you. So after college and after football, I came back and I was cut from the Raiders. I decided to go back and finish my master's degree in business administration. Throughout this process, like I said, I lost 100 pounds, but I also lost my father to drugs and alcohol throughout that battle. So it was in December of 2015, and I was about 24, 25 years old, and I really had to reinvent myself. Juan, I had to kind of look at myself and say, okay, you're no longer an athlete. You just lost your father to drugs and alcohol. You got to figure out what you're going to do next. And I really dove back into my faith at that time and tried to figure out what I was going to be focused on. And I started getting into reading, so I can see all of your books behind me. If your listeners are watching this on YouTube, you can see all my books behind here. And ever since then, I've been on a really strong path to financial freedom and passive investing in real estate. I thought the best way for me to get involved in that was to help other people do that. And so I worked in the startup sales community for a while, went to a larger company, was a director of sales at a larger company, and I was fired from that job. And, again, I had to reinvent myself and figure out what I was going to do. Well, I decided I was never going to work for anybody else ever again. So I started my own company. My wife started the company for me, which was great. She had a lot of support for me. I started my own company, and I went on as a director of acquisitions for a large Delaware statutory trust fund here in Kansas City, and I picked up about 50 other clients through my own marketing and hustle. And in less than 12 months, about 9 months, I was able to build my investor list to over 150 people, purchase over 120 properties. These are all smaller multifamily and single families, and I cut my teeth on transactions. I really got to understand how to estimate rehabs, walk properties, what to look for, how to find off-market properties, and how to work with out-of-state investors. And so now I've moved myself into the next level of commercial multifamily and doing my own development deals, as well as partnering with other builders and developers here in the city. So I'm a general partner on 3 active deals right now. We've completed 2 in the last 6 months, and I broker deals at around $1 million or above, and they're usually all off market, and they're all investment sales, so commercial mixed use, multifamily, triple net lease type of stuff. And I have 2 properties myself going right now and $1 million renovation, which we could talk about as well. So that's a little bit about me and my background.
Yeah, that's not a background at all. I mean, that's nothing, man. There's no stories to tell there. So, no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, man. So, he's like, yeah, are you serious? No, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So I would say, tell us about your brokerage side.
Sure.
Let's start there, because there's so many different things to talk about. So I want to start there. Tell us about your brokerage side, and because a lot of my audience, they're investors themselves. They're looking for deals. A lot of them are passive investors, but like I said, we have a lot of guys that are looking for their own deals, and a lot of times you can't find deals in your own backyard, right?
Yeah.
So you're in Kansas City. You kind of are in that market. You study that market, and you've done transactions, within that market. So give us an example, or give us some examples to where, if we have buyers that are looking to buy, like in other markets that are besides their local markets, what they should do, how they should approach when approach somebody like yourself, and also when looking for deals.
Absolutely. Some really good things there to unpack. And I would like to start with saying that, I think that Kansas City, as I would say a lot of the other markets in the cities or in the United States right now, is very competitive on the multifamily side. And so I understand, when I looked at the commercial multifamily market, I understand that there's a lot of people going after listings, and that's totally fine. That's been the mantra for brokers for a long time. I've never had listings before, and I don't really care to. And if I talk to other brokers in the market, they're kind of crazy. They think I'm a little bit crazy. But what I found is a recipe to figure out how to take an out-of-state investor, work them through my process of what they're actually looking for. And usually they start with a multifamily property. We underwrite a lot of multifamily properties that are available either on market or off market. And I could talk a little bit more about that. And then we find that the yield that they're actually looking for, they love Kansas City, but the yield that they're looking for, they might not actually get from multifamily properties. So what I've found is being able to help people solve problems on the management and the construction side to allow them to go invest in a commercial mixed-use property. So just last week, we closed on $1 million property in Westport. This guy was wanting a 25-unit apartment complex. We underwrote a bunch of them. He saw that the yields really weren't there, even from an off-market standpoint. And so he said, "Well, what else can you think about that might give me the yield that I'm looking for?" And I own 2 commercial mixed-use buildings as well. And I said, "Well, I've really found a nice niche of taking a commercial tenant for your first floor and having a triple net lease for 7 years, and then having residential upstairs." I went and sourced him one right in the heart of Westport in Kansas City, Missouri. We closed in less than 60 days, and he's super excited about it. And I also have some Airbnbs that I'm involved in commercial properties here. So I was able to hook him up with my property manager. And now he's got one residential unit that we rent out from an Airbnb standpoint. We created this whole side yard with outdoor games and created this experience. I just hosted an event last night, and we were talking about how to set ourselves apart as operators and landowners. And millennials, they want an experience. And so if you can create that fun experience for them, they're going to pick your property over other ones. So I've positioned myself in Kansas City as the premier buyer's agent and help people from out of state understand how to invest in Kansas City. And I have 4 really things that I work through, and I'm just going to cover those really closely. And I'd like for your listeners just to kind of hone in. If you get one thing out of what I'm saying today, it would be these 4 things. So one, when you're working with a broker from an outside investor standpoint, you're not local. You need to have really clear expectations on what you're going to need to do your due diligence and your criteria. And you also need to have really just what I'll call realistic expectations that are realistic. And if they're not, I will tell you. And I'll say, hey, you know what? I haven't seen that for a while, and maybe you can find that somewhere else, but that's great. I can't find that for you because I'm not going to spin my wheels and let you spin your wheels. So I get clear expectations on one, what they're going to need to underwrite a property. What do they need? Do they want to see comps, or do they want to see actuals? Are they okay buying on a pro forma instead of the actuals? There's a lot of different things to work through there. And so I talk through what that criteria and what those due diligence items are up front. It's kind of a qualifying process for me and for the buyer. So, it's just what we're trying to get to here is to see if there's an opportunity to collaborate. So that's the first thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think this, and you can stop and ask questions on any of these points too. I think the second thing is, track record. I was a newbie at one point. Everybody was a newbie at one point, and I'm okay with working with newbies. But the thing is if you are acting like you're not, and you actually are, that's where we get a lot of issues in. So if you have a track record, great. Present that in a way to me so I could present it to sellers, because right now, competitive markets, the best offer from a price standpoint might not win. It's who's going to close and what are the terms right now. The prices, the sellers are getting you prices. It's really what's the track record, how are they going to close? And so that's my second one is how do we make your track record known to the sellers in the marketplace, because we have to figure out a way to get our offer, that's going to stand out before somebody else's. The third one is communication. I have a little bit of a story on this one. And some of the questions I think about when I say communication is just, what is your structure as an entity? I'm a syndicator. I do syndications. I have joint venture structures. Well, I lost a 32-unit listing because I brought an offer from a full-price out-of-state client, and I was introduced to this gentleman from somebody who I very much trust. Well, we were both under the impression that it was his money that he was using. And at the end of the day, we get into escrow. We're 30 days into this thing, and we've underwrote it 6 times, and it's been great. But something came up because the money's about to go hard, and I didn't ask, hey, what is your structure for your investors? I didn't know he had investors. I thought he was the end client. So I learned this one the hard way, and we lost that deal. And coincidentally, I'm actually going to lose the listing now, which is unfortunate. But it's my fault because I should have asked, hey, are you taking this to your investors? Because if so, this deal might not be the best one because there's not enough hair on there for everybody to feel comfortable with. So communicating what your structure is up front. Will you be syndicating? How's this going to work? What return needs to be projected to your investors? Let's see if we can find a model and a structure that works well for that. That'd be my third one. My fourth one is be willing to pay up front. And I don't mean monetarily, hey, I want you to pay me. What I mean is I want you to pay me with your time, your effort, and coming into the city and really looking at the market. So I really find that when people fly into the city, I pick them up from the airport. We spend a day looking at properties, looking at different areas. Every market is so different. Kansas City is big enough where we can cover it one day. But when you're just looking at a map and you're looking at heat maps of crime and you're looking at this and that to try to really understand a market, it's pretty difficult unless you get it there and actually get with somebody who's showing you all the new developments, taking to the local spots, and so you can see where these properties and the path of progress really is.
I would say on that's a very good point. I've looked at deals in the past that on paper or online you see a little bit higher crime rate, but then once you're there, I mean, it has a totally different feel. And so, and those crime rates, could have been, part of the past. But as you're getting new development, as you're getting the feel, the sense, it's totally different. And then you're thinking, okay, well, you know what? It's actually not as bad as it seemed on paper.
Yep.
There's new businesses coming in. So what is it? And so that gives you the actually a huge leg up as being the guy that actually went to go tour and went to go see the market. When they go see the property itself versus somebody else that's not local again. And you're looking at it as like, you know what, I don't even want to look further. I'm just going to pass on it, but it could be a good opportunity. So I really like that one. I mean, all the points that you gave are really, really good, but that one also stood out a lot. So.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Juan. I think that just talking about missed opportunities too, I have a story about this. People call LoopNet the place where deals go to die, right? And the MLS, if something is on the multiple listing service, a lot of times it's been picked over, or it might be just somebody that's wanting to test the market, so to speak. But I actually have had a lot of success with actually picking up a phone, calling that person who has that listed, and saying, hey, I noticed that you have this 8-unit apartment complex. I also noticed that you are a residential real estate agent, and I looked up your transaction history, and you do luxury homes. So why do you have an apartment complex? You don't know anything about an apartment complex, and you have it priced over $150,000 what it needs to be. Made a phone call, had an honest conversation, shared an appraisal report with one that I did literally right up the next street. She had it priced the same for an 8-unit that was for a 12-unit. We went into escrow a week later for $180,000 under the purchase price.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very important lesson to investors to say, have a trusted resource. If there's a property you're interested in, if you have a good agent that you're working with, a broker that you're working with, they will pick up the phone for you and see what's going on. Because one, I know all the players and the hitters in the space, and if you're working with an agent that's doing any type of volume on transactions, so will they. Pick up the phone, call them, get the scoop on it, and then call them back. Say, hey, they've had a lot of interest. It's probably not the best one for us, but if it's been on there for 3 months and it's still there, there's something going on with that. It's probably been through inspections. Grab an inspection report for free. See if you feel comfortable with what the other person wasn't comfortable with, and see where the missed opportunity is. You might be able to renegotiate. So one thing I would say is LoopNet, yes, is a place that deals kind of go to die, so to speak. But at the same time, there sometimes are gems and diamonds in the rough. And if you have a good agent or broker that you're working with, they'll be able to point those out for you.
Great point. I really love that. So there's also deals to where they have been there for a long time on LoopNet. They've been there for a long time. You've seen it for a year, but situations change. So a deal to where you see it's like, man, it's been there for a year. It's had so many views, because you can see the number of views, or like even
Absolutely.
like the agents. And people have looked at this and passed on it so many times. There's got to be something wrong.
Yes.
If all these bigger players are passing on it, why should I even bother and spend time to look at it? But what you're not realizing right there is that situations change. So it's one price at one point. Maybe the agent didn't update the price or whatever, because it's been a year.
Yep.
And like I said, the price may be different now. So if you just pick up the phone, I'll call somebody like yourself that has experience in that, and say, hey, tell me a little bit more about this. Can you find out more information? What's the latest? Are they still selling this property, or what's going on? Maybe somebody died. Maybe they went through a tough situation like that to where it kind of delayed the process. So I really like that, because it brought up that point. And just try it. LoopNet, yes, as you said, for the most part, deals are not the best, but there's still opportunities, man. I've heard of guys buying deals on LoopNet all the time, and that's kind of their source. That's their niche, so to speak, because nobody else is taking advantage of that. So love it, man, love it.
Absolutely, 100%. And I will also say that Craigslist is an also interesting place for some properties too. I've made some really great connections to landowners and property owners that own a ton of real estate that just go on Craigslist and sell them one by one. Well, I've been able to make connections with those individuals and say, hey, I know you got single family listed on Craigslist, but a lot of times those guys will also have multifamily and commercial properties as well that they don't have listed, because that's not the place to put necessarily that stuff for Craigslist. But that's another kind of tidbit for your clients. And it also I only spend about an hour a week on Craigslist, just kind of. They have a map feature, which is really great. So I go to the map feature and I say, okay, these are the areas of town that I'm really interested in. And I just scroll into that area and I'm like, okay, yep. I see that this person is just spamming. That's not probably something I want to. Oh, but there's a 12-unit apartment complex that's been just uploaded. I've bought multiple deals in less than 30 minutes off of Craigslist like that. So that would be another one that I can also kind of speak to a little bit.
Let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit, because I think that's a great way for. I mean, again, we have a different, different backgrounds as far as my listeners are concerned. But there's guys that I have that are listening that are looking to get into that first, 8-unit, 12-unit, 20-unit, and which is great. So I want to be able to provide some value for them. So tell me, how can somebody find or use Craigslist as a good resource?
Okay, so 2 ways here. So one, you're going to want to see who is posting the most ads, right? So there's a feature in Craigslist where you can see all of an account user's postings. And so usually property managers or people that are doing leasing are putting their things up on Craigslist. Call those property managers and say, hey, I noticed that you have a lot of listings for lease. I'm in the actual business of buying a property. I was wondering if any of your clients were interested in selling their properties. They will have leads for you. And a lot of times that property managers aren't necessarily in the brokerage business. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And if they are, great. They'll broker the deal with you or for you. That's totally fine. But just getting in with those sellers. So they already have that pre-relationship with the seller. So I've made friends with a lot of property managers for that reason. Right? One, I refer a lot of business to them because I'm doing a lot of transactions and I need good property managers. But 2, when we're walking that third property, I refer to them and I kind of look at, I say, hey, Colin, we've been working together for some time, and I'd really like to know if any of your clients are looking to sell their properties. I have a lot of buyers right now, and your sellers might not know that they can get really great price for what they're holding on to right now. And I've been introduced to a lot of off-market opportunities that way. So I prospect Craigslist for actually talking to property managers. And I know you're going to have a lot of single family and small multifamily stuff on Craigslist. Those guys always manage a random 12-unit building, a random 25-unit building. That one, they're like, hey, I got to get rid of this thing. It's a pain in my butt, and I don't want to do it anymore. Find me a seller, or find me a buyer. I can really push this seller into actually making a deal happen. So that's a great way to do it. And then secondly is I go to the postings and I see who's posting a lot. And if it's not a property manager, what I found is that baby boomers who own 55, 75, 100 doors, they love Craigslist. They haven't figured out Zillow quite yet, but they still love Craigslist, and they post everything on Craigslist, and they get people, and it works for them because it's really simple, right? And it works for them great. But I've made contact with a lot of property owners directly that are their own agents or brokers or whatever, but they're like, hey, I really work on seller financing stuff and all of these different creative opportunities. It's really a passion project for me to help people with housing. Fantastic. Want to continue that? Hey, would you be willing to maybe look at an offer where we might be able to take out 25, 35 of these properties? And oh, by the way, do you have a multifamily property that's for sale or a commercial property? Even if I'm not going to deal with the single family properties, which I don't, I have plenty of agents who are just chomping at the bit and wholesalers that would love a chance to take a look at those properties. So those are 2 things for your listeners to get on Craigslist and kind of work through together.
So just to recap, having your property managers, it's a win-win situation because you are referring business to them, and then you're building a strong enough relationship with them that they'll also obviously they know the owners. They'll know who is going to be coming up next to be selling or is going to be interested to sell. So you have that, you build that relationship strong enough, then you'll get business back, right? So you help
Absolutely.
them out, and then eventually, hopefully, you'll get something back on that point too. And then on the other side, as far as reaching out to some of the older owners, that's another great strategy, because you can kind of ease into that, and then get to what you're really looking for, which is that 12 unit, that 20 unit, eventually. So that's a great,
Yep.
really, some really good tips right there. So I like those, man. Thanks for sharing those. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about
Okay.
some of your recent projects that you are actually involved in. We can talk about your development deals.
Yeah.
Some of the deals that you are involved in as a GP.
Wonderful. So, I at September of that year that I was doing all those transactions, our market really started to pick up on the small multifamily and single family side. And, I kind of said, I got to figure out a way to get my investors yield. I know how to build investor lists. I know how to communicate. I know how to find property, but I need to change asset class. And so I dove into a lot of books that are sitting right behind me. I have a whole real estate section over here. And I also listen to a lot of podcasts, yours being one of them. And the real estate guys have been doing it for a long time. And so, I kind of was listening to the real estate guys, and they're like, hey, well, we got this event. And they kept saying this word, syndication. And Juan, I'm not a very smart guy, but I work really hard. So I was like, I don't know what that word is. I'm not sure I can spell that word. So I Googled that word and said, what is syndication? And I said, wow, that's an interesting thing. I think I've got probably about $1 or $2 million sitting of equity, maybe, that I could go raise really quickly. And me having those pre-existing relationships allowed me to do that legally. And so I was able to talk with my investors about what their appetites were for. And they said, you know what, we would be very open to doing that. And I was like, okay. So I flew down, went to that event. I hired Michael Blanc to do some coaching for me, who was also a podcaster, and helped me really start to underwrite multifamily properties. And I just started getting my at-bats. I started underwriting. I would actually act like a buyer to all the other brokers in the city. And it's funny, I've had some conversations with a few of them now, and they're like, well, we thought you were a buyer. I said, well, I am a buyer, but at the same time, I am an agent and a broker myself too. So, you have to be careful with those, because you don't want to waste too many people's times. But they really respected me because I sent my model back with details on why that property wasn't going to be the best one for me. What I found was that Kansas City was trading at between a 6.5, maybe a 7 cap with an institutional. I was like, well, why would somebody come to Kansas City and do that if they can do that in Dallas, if they can do that in California, and or somewhere else where a lot of people are looking for real estate a little bit more. So multifamily wasn't really the route that I decided to go. So I started to underwrite just weird deals. So I started to figure out, okay, my background, I have hotel and restaurant management background. I've got this background. So, well, where can I put all these things together? And I came across this opportunity for a bed and breakfast hotel on the Kansas City Plaza, which is one of the premier dining and entertainment and shopping districts in Kansas City. I picked up the phone. I have this little earpiece in my ear 12 hours out of the day. Called the listing agent. I said, hey, what's going on with this? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, I need to know a little bit about this. They signed me at the CA. I got the numbers back, and I had to call and say, is this a misprint, or is this what it's actually spinning off on cash flow? And they said, no, that's it. And so I went out and I found some partners that were much more experienced to do the management side, which was admittedly somewhat difficult to find a bed and breakfast hotel operator management team. But I found them, and I moved my license actually to that brokerage, and they're my partners in this deal. And I went out and raised all the equity, which wasn't too much, but it was over $1 million of equity on a very niche product for a bed and breakfast hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. And so during our due diligence phase on that one, I actually found another bed and breakfast hotel, and we negotiated 93% seller financing with that. Closed it in 30 days. I had to raise about $750K. Went back, did that really quickly, and what do you know? In 6 months, we have 2 bed and breakfast hotels, and we have 25 units that we've got to manage and bring up to bring back to life. And so it's been an exciting experience, and I'm working on my third one in Wichita, Kansas right now, which I'm pretty pumped up about. But that was kind of a niche product that we've come into only because we can manage that in-house. Okay, so my partners own about 750 apartment complexes in and around Midtown and Kansas City, 15 commercial buildings, not including my holdings as well. And they said, you know what, I think that we've got an opportunity here to maybe be a GP for a few new deals, and you've really proven yourself to be able to raise equity and make those relationships with private equity firms, guys like yourself who have a great network, and we want to see if we can do this. And so now we're going to be the sponsor on a 64-unit senior living new development here in Kansas City, and over 110-unit apartment complex that we're going to reposition. And this has created a new kind of line of business for me to think about. Okay, well, if I have the good operators and the good deals in Kansas City and maybe other markets, but the really behind real estate, Juan, you know, this is people. And if you find the right people to be with and sponsor deals with, the real estate's always going to be okay. Sure, you need a good deal, but more than that, you need good people. And so if I can talk to any of your listeners about when they're looking at working with somebody, make sure that you feel good about the person that's behind the real estate. Make sure they have your best interest at heart. So what we do at Fleming's Real Estate and at Live Free Investments, we go vet these operators. And we say, okay, we like you. We think you have a good track record and experience. We then take what they're doing on their opportunities that they're working on, and we connect them with our capital partners. So we're almost a middleman, but we also co-invest in the deals, and we are co-general partners. So we manage a lot of this stuff. So we're going to manage that senior unit deal. We're going to manage the apartment complexes. We already do that. So we kind of play a little bit of a capital raiser / co-general partner in the properties that we're working on. And we're doing some self-storage in opportunity zones now. Senior living is another opportunity that we're starting to really look at, and self-storage is really kind of the two asset classes that I'm really focused on right now is underwriting and understanding and raising equity for and finding good operators, and I think we've done that. So that's been a little bit of my experience on that, and it's been a little bit of a different twist on how to get into that, but I'm trying to kind of systemize it and get back. I went to it, from a very niche perspective, but that at least opened the door for the right people that I needed to be around to be able to do larger opportunities, and that's what we're focused on now.
I love that. So you started off with the hotels, basically. That's kind of like the way you got started, like in your first 2 deals, I think is what you said, or and you're working on your third one.
So my first deal was actually a joint venture with an out-of-state investor, and it was a mixed-use commercial building that had 2 Airbnbs on top and a bagel shop on the bottom. And so I invested in that with him, and we're also doing a second one on those. But on the actual 506B or C syndications, yes, it was the 2 hotels.
Gotcha. So why not stay within that niche in the hotels and on the syndication side? Why are you looking to expand maybe like into the self storage? Besides, we know the benefits in the self storage. Is it just because there's a lack of more opportunity in the hotel side, or is it just because you're trying to be more opportunistic and finding other deals and other asset classes?
Yeah, great question. And I think there's 2 points there. One is deal size. So it takes me just as much time to do a $2.5 million bed and breakfast hotel as it does to do a $25 million 115 unit, 130 unit apartment complex. So it's a time thing for me. Mm-hmm. And then also the investor groups that I'm starting to work with, they don't like to really get into an equity side of a opportunity unless it's a $3, $5, $10 million equity check. So it makes more sense for them to do larger deals as well. And then thirdly, I guess I have 3 points on this, is that there's only so many good bed and breakfast hotel operations that I can go purchase that are going to be kind of off market and will be lucrative and in our market, right? So we want to make sure we're stabilizing the ones that we have before we go acquire more. We're still on the lookout for them, but at the same time, we want to be careful not to indulge, I'll say, in that asset class. It's more of just a diversification for us. We believe whenever, or not a recession, but maybe a setback on the economy does happen, that the big players like the Marriotts and those things might get hit a little bit harder than a boutique hotel that has a customer base that stay there over 150 nights out of the year. So we have 25 units down the plaza. If there were more properties down there, we would probably pick them up or at least pursue them, but there's not. And that's a very management intensive program and project. So we want to stay in between about a 3-hour radius. And really, if you think about Kansas City and a 3-hour radius, there's not a whole lot of areas that I would really want to go put quite a bit of my investors' money, my own capital in from a bed and breakfast hotel standpoint, other than the plaza and maybe over in Wichita as well. So there's just the limitations of the supply from that standpoint on that asset class.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. Great point. So, Logan, it's time for our Nuggets of Wealth. And these are questions that I ask you guys every weekend. So hopefully, we can provide some value here.
Absolutely.
What's a good tool, source, or platform that you use almost daily that can also help others?
Okay. I would say there's one, and it's going to be Bigger Pockets. And the reason being is I have made more resourceful connections on Bigger Pockets that have led to more business for me than any other platform. And I understand that it's really based on smaller multifamily and single family, but what it does, Juan, is it helps people understand that they need to move their money off of Wall Street and into Main Street. And that's the first biggest light bulb for people. Once that happens, I can take them and say, you don't need to start in single family. We can go look at larger multifamily, and here's why. And I solved that mental barrier. And Travis, well, I'm gonna butcher the name right now, so I won't say it. But a different guest on a different podcast always talks. He's Joe Fearless's mentor. I can't remember his name right now, but he's Tony Robbins' coach.
Trevor McGregor. I talked to Trevor, and he talks about crushing those limiting beliefs. Well, I think a lot of times that people have those limiting beliefs with, hey, I got to start on a single family. No, you don't. I did not. I jumped into a $600,000 commercial multifamily property with Airbnbs without a manager. I did that because I was able to talk to people who were doing it and leveling up. So I would say Bigger Pockets on the resource side. Gotcha. Good one. Yeah, and I second that. Bigger Pockets is great. It has a lot of good information. So you're out there listening. No matter what space you're wanting to be in, there's a resource for you. Bigger Pockets. Just go there, and you'll get overwhelmed with the amount of information that's there. You really will. Absolutely will. You got to zone in. What was the best business advice you ever received? Slow down to go fast, aka be quick but don't hurry. So I think that in real estate we all get really excited and we all get really pumped up, which is great. And it's important to have a lot of passion and drive and motivation and ambition and persistence and perseverance. But at the same time, my partners are where they're at because they did not make fast decisions. If a deal is going to be there, or a deal is going to be good enough to be there, and it's going to take time to actually do the due diligence, and it takes 6 months to run something down, it's still a good deal after you first looked at it 6 months later. That's a good deal. So when you're doing larger acquisitions, be quick, but don't hurry. Slow down to go fast. That's probably the best business advice this year that I've really received. Be patient. I like that. I like that quote. Slow down to go fast. Yeah, I never heard it that way, but it makes a lot of sense. Yes. Be patient, and sometimes those smaller steps are really the most important steps, and the steps that will take you a lot further. So, absolutely. That's awesome. What book are you currently reading? It's Capital Raising. I don't have it down here. It's Capital Raising by Richard Wilson of FamilyOfficeClub.com. He's got a five-step program, and what I've done is great, but I'd love to understand how he has raised billions of dollars from investors, and so I'm trying to work through that 5-step program right now. One book that I'm always rereading is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, and Chris was actually a Kansas City guy. He was on the SWAT team here. One thing I've got for your listeners, Juan, is a book review that I put together on the actionable steps that I've been able to put in place, negotiating contracts,
taking big problems that happen during due diligence and walking people through them rationally instead of emotionally, using his steps. I've got that in a PDF that I'd like to obviously offer to all of your listeners. So
Sure.
We've got that. So Never Split the Difference is one that I'm rereading. And then the third one that I listen to every 3 months, love him or hate him, but Grant Cardone's 10X rule is a mentality that I try to take on every single day. Sell or Be Sold by him is great. Be Obsessed or Be Average is just kind of a repeat of those books. But 10X Rule by Grant Cardone is probably some of his best work. So those are the three that I would say.
I actually have it here.
There it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
One of my buddies went to his events this week or this past year in Miami, and it was quite hilarious how he kind of came in. But Grant Cardone, guy dived in and rolled an ankle or whatever, but the guy owns 4,000 units, so he's doing something right? So that mentality, I love that he's a self-made man, and that's kind of where I'm coming from as well, and I think it's a very good book to get your mentality and psychology right.
Yeah, I second that as well. I mean, that book is, it's more of a psychological book, kind of get you straight is what it is. But it makes a lot of sense. I really like it as well. What do you see your business in the next 5 years?
I would say that I see my business. I've been exploring actually getting a securities license and not doing as much brokering, so to speak, but more or less on the capital raising side for different opportunities. So filling that void. And I think that that's where I see my business going to. I still like the brokerage side. It's still really fun to work with buyers and sellers. But at the end of the day, I would say that I see myself being really focused on general partnerships, on me being the general partner and raising equity, and having really great operators that I partner with, that I place capital with.
Love that. Okay. At the end of your life, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a guy who treat people right. And so honesty, integrity, and really accountability are three things that I'm always thinking about. So if somebody thinks about me at the end of my life, or they said, hey, do you know Logan Freeman? I just want them to smile and say, man, that guy's he treats people right, and he works really hard. Might not have been the smartest guy, but you know what? He's a great networker, and he's a good person to be around. That's what I want. It's my whole goal in life is my Christian faith is to help myself get to heaven and get other people there. And the only way that I can do that is by living the gospel out and helping people do that. So that's really what I want to be remembered on.
Love it, man. Love it. Where can Commit to Wealth Nation go to contact you and find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so you can head to my website, livefreeinvestments.com. That all my social media is there. My marketing manager is awesome. He's always posting stuff for me, and I don't know all the time what he's posting, but livefreeinvestments.com is probably the best way to get a hold of me. You can contact me there if you're interested in Kansas City. I'd love to chat with you, and that's where you can get with me.
Sweet. Okay, sounds great. Well, Logan, you definitely have provided a ton of energy and a ton of value, to my listeners. So hopefully, they are able to pick up a couple of things, from all the points that you gave us here today. So with that said, I wish you continued success in everything that you do.
Thank you so much, Juan. Thank you for having me. And again, if I can help your listeners in any way, please have them reach out to me.
CommitToWealth.com, creating a legacy by committing to real estate wealth.